But the first question is, last year, the government poured more than 1 billion into 19 out of the top 20 countries run by the world's most corrupt regimes, such as Syria, Sudan, Somalia, and North Korea. Tory MP Philip Davis has said, "This is a colossal waste of money. Do the panel agree, and what should we do about it?"
Look at this list as well, which is compiled by Transparency International, and as it's been alluded to earlier, that the list has got some war-torn countries that have suffered from war: South Sudan, Afghanistan, Syria, and so on. So it's not surprising that there's a lot of poverty in these countries as well, and there's no effective government. I should say that actually, I was surprised not to see in that top 20 list of corrupt countries Bangladesh, because back in the 90s, Bangladesh was #1 country on that list. And my parents are from Bangladesh, so I have got some interest there. Now, it's a horrible thing to live in a corrupt country because, as my cousins and aunts and uncles have told me, when you go for a job interview in a corrupt country, the first thing you need to do is pass an envelope to the interviewer to get that job, regardless of your qualifications or skills. And that's what it's like to live in a corrupt country. So I'm not opposed to trying to make a difference in those countries. What needs to happen actually is that what we need to make sure of, and this is the Green Party policy, is that we have an independent, publicly accountable body that monitors the aid effectiveness of the aid that we send to these countries to ensure that it's working and looking after the people that need it most.
Peter Morgan. Poverty, you say it's in corrupt countries. Question 1, what is the aid being, how is aid being used to address the bad governance in countries? Question 2, I don't think it's true that corrupt equals poor. Ghana's quite a poor country, but it's not a corrupt country. Population growth is a major problem with poverty. What are we doing to address population growth? For example, the population of Nigeria went up 6 times in 50 years. If population is going to grow at that rate, how are we going to address poverty? What are we doing to address population growth? Why is the aid budget increasing when other budgets are cut or held? What's the justification for actually increasing the aid? And none of the panelists have explained how they will get aid spent effectively. Zimbabwe, corrupt country, brutal dictator in charge, ruthless control. How can we help the people in Zimbabwe without helping Mugabe stay in power? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I think the conversation's kind of like angling towards the idea that actually it's not a good idea to kind of make any effort to support these countries that need our help because of all the potential drawbacks, whether the money's going to get to the right people and so on. But these countries, Christian Aid have done a report recently where actually these multinational companies that are mining in these poor countries, that are going for industrialized food and those sort of activities, they're actually not paying tax in those countries to the tune of £105 billion. So what needs to happen actually is that let's go after that money as well and support poorer countries to be able to get that money back in taxation and stop this tax dodging.
Is Trevor Davis in the audience?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Trevor. You asked 3 very good questions, and I'll start with the first, if I may. This is your statement. The EU is a racket that looks after its own. A true statement by Nigel Farage, especially in the context of the question, does charity begin at home? There is talk about the UK taxpayers paying towards EU pensions. Would one of the panelists like to make a comment, please?
It hasn't collapsed. I don't know if you've noticed.
It's collapsed in Greece, it's collapsed in Portugal, Greece is on the way out.
But
Ireland,
not long
it's been an
ago,
absolute
people from
disaster.
UKIP, Nigel Farage and others were saying that Greece, Italy, Spain, Portugal were going to be pushed out of the euro, but they weren't.
They haven't been yet.
Very easy to quote the countries where there are problems, and of course there are problems in Greece, Italy, Spain, but you haven't quoted the countries like Germany, the Netherlands, and the other countries in the north where the euro is very successfully working. Had Britain been in the euro, which group would we have been? Might have been in the more successful one. Well, you know, the economies of some of these countries, the Netherlands is doing very well, thank you. Luxembourg.
I think you've also highlighted the problem there, that again... there's
If you'd
another
have a
issue.
question, madam, I'll give you a microphone so we can all hear.
There's another issue, isn't there, about when we joined the European Union, we had some influence. It was a group of nations that were of a similar economic base. As the European Union has expanded,
can I just
we've
say,
got a lot less influence, and it's caused a lot more
If you
economic problems for us.
find the EU such a scandal and it's a racket, why do you draw your salary from the European
I
Union?
don't.
The MEPs, why do they draw the salary?
Well, why shouldn't they? They do a job just like any other MEP in the Parliament.
It's almost endorsing it in a way. If you want to show principle,
What are you
don't
suggesting? They
accept
work
the
for
salary.
free? They work for free, they travel to Strasbourg, they travel to
Don't have
Brussels
to,
for
don't
free.
have
worst
to draw the
attenders of
salary.
committees.
Actually,
Show
that's not true.
principle and don't draw the salary. Can I carry on?
Look, can I just remind you that UKIP won the European elections? What are our MEPs supposed to do? Having been elected, sit at home and do nothing? And not go and not draw a salary?
when you turn up to the European Union,
you can't.
When you're
you
elected
do nothing
an MP,
anyway.
when you're
Thank you
elected
very
an
much
MP,
indeed.
will
I
you be
think-
prepared
Can I
not
just
to draw
say,
a
can I-
salary?
I think we could spend the evening debating this, so I need to move
Can I just say
on.
one thing on the EU? Just one thing very quickly. There's a very important thing that's happening about the European Union and the US, which is the Transatlantic Trade and Partnership. TTIP as it's known. And I don't know how many of you know about it, but basically it means that the rules and regulations will change for corporations. So they'll actually have their own judicial system, that this is what is secretly being discussed. So when a corporation actually, let's say for example in Australia at the moment, Philip Morris, tobacconist, is actually looking to sue the Australian government for actually removing packaging on cigarette packets. They'll threaten to do that in this country as well through TTIP. Now, in other countries in South America, where they tried to introduce a minimum wage, corporations have gone after them to be able to actually sue them as well for losses. Now, this is the discussion that's happening with the Lib Dems, Labour and the Conservative all in favour. Now, if you kind of approve this sort of behaviour and you want us to be able to actually be sued by a corporation that's going to be taking on our NHS services in the future, let's say for example, then you've got a choice actually. You can vote for one of those three parties, or you go for the Green Party, which opposes TTIP.
As does UKIP.
Well, because it's a European Union issue, I guess.
Thank you very much indeed for your views, Sasha. Is Leanne Bruni in the audience? Thank you, Leanne. Leanne's question is, 1 in 4 children in the UK live in poverty. Bearing this in mind, shouldn't our priority be eliminating poverty in the UK as opposed to abroad? To substantiate your figures there, Robert, 1 million children go to bed every night hungry. 900 billion people go to bed without clean water in the following morning, and 2.4 billion people don't have a toilet. So this is what we're comparing ourselves with, those poor people that don't have water and don't have sanitation. Thank you, Robert.
Yeah, again, like it's been alluded as well, I'm very uncomfortable with the question that you compare one poor child, for example, a child that's in a poor country in Africa or Asia who has to walk maybe 8 miles every day to just get drinking water, compared with maybe a child whose mother is just lost her incapacity benefit because they just failed the Fit for Work test by Atos or something along those lines, and they're struggling as well. So what needs to happen is that we need to support both groups. Now, as a Green, when I hear statistics like 85 people on this planet have the same amount of wealth as the poorest 3.5 billion people on this planet, it disgusts me. And when I hear Boris Johnson talk about the amount of, and bragging about the amount of billionaires that live in London, and that are more than New York and Paris, it's quite abhorrent to hear that sort of thing. So we want to see inequality reduced in the Green Party. Now, one of the things we would do, policies we would do at home, well, one thing we would do is actually not have the austerity measures that all but 22 MPs yesterday voted for £30 billion worth of austerity measures, which is going to affect the poorest in our society and the most vulnerable. And again, the Green Party MP Caroline Lucas is one of those MPs, because it's not in her principle to do that, voted against it. Now, overseas, what we should be doing is actually looking at a Robin Hood tax, a tax on financial transactions. Now, I'm not talking about a 5% tax on transactions. I'm not talking a 0.5% tax on transactions. It's just 0.05% tax on financial transactions, and that will raise £250 billion. Foreign exchange markets with those big bankers that are exchanging the money. Are you opposed to that then? Why?
Because it's economically necessary.
How so? Can they not afford it?
If you tax financial transactions, it's like stamp duty on house purchase, it comes back and hits the ordinary people. If you tax the wealthy, then the ordinary people pay more. Look at the football players. Look at in France, they put the tax rate up to 75%, but footballers in France are on net pay deals. So they get the same money, but the club has to pay the extra tax, and the club goes bust. The punters have to pay the tax.
It's not relevant,
If you complain about...
It's not relevant.
Yeah, you asked me the question,
I'll tell you about... Listen,
if you tax financial transactions, there is a massive burden of administration, and that money has to come from the transaction.
Is that because...
So when you buy your...
What's Douglas Carswell's former
job?
Oh, he's a banker, that was right.
I'm not concerned with that person. If you want to go abroad, you have to buy a foreign currency. If you have to pay another tax on it, your currency costs more.
Well, you make sure that you put legislation in to stop that from happening.
How?
Listen, if you have principle, you will stop it. Because I am interested in stopping inequality, unlike maybe the UKIP party.
Oh, okay. It's just one thing that's bothering me about all this poverty and everything, is that a lot of rich people, and especially rich foreign investors, are just buying up all our properties in England and just raking off money from there. And that means that people who live here actually can't afford to buy their own homes and can't afford to live. And that is increasing the poverty of this country. And what good is that doing to ordinary people? Is anything at all being done to stop this happening? Because it's really upsetting. I mean, it started off with people buying places in Cornwall, rich people buying places, and then local people can't afford to buy. I personally think it ought to be illegal for foreigners to buy places here until they've lived here for at least 10 years. And I think that people shouldn't be able to just buy second homes and just rent them out. I don't believe in property for investment, because it's making people homeless. It's just not fair. Stop people from buying who have, okay, I've got a £10 million house, and I'm going to buy that flat as well, and I'm going to buy that flat, and I'm going to buy that flat, and so other people can't get them because the price goes up so much. How are you going to stop that? How? Oh.
The question is from Raj Sood, and the question is, when will the government and the Labour Party listen to its 70 million citizens? Can the traditional parties not understand that we're simply fed up with foreign aid policy and the cuts that affect us here? When will you hear us? After the next coalition of UKIP and the Greens? Very much indeed. And the final word from Shasha.
Thank you. So if foreign aid and international aid matters to you, obviously there's certain sections of the room it doesn't, but if it does, you should maybe go back to 2010, just before the election, when all the manifestos were out. The World Development Movement analysed the policies of all the parties, and they marked them out of 10. So the Green Party was scored top, 8 out of 10. Lib Dems 6 out of 10, Labour 5 out of 10, and the Conservatives 3 out of 10. So if it matters to you about international aid, foreign aid, and supporting poorer countries, then the Green Party is the party for you. Now, I do sense as well that people are fed up with politics and political parties. I have to confess, I don't really consider myself a politician as such. I feel I'm more of a campaigner. One of the things I'm doing is actually, as was mentioned at the start, I'm taking Sutton Council to court about building an incinerator just about 3.5 miles away from here. At quite great risk to myself, actually. At one point, there was a risk I could possibly lose my house about the monies that I'd have to find to be able to tackle, actually, not just Sutton Council, Croydon Council, Suzanne's Council, Merton, and also Kingston Council, and also a FTSE 250 company called Viridor. So therefore, if you're looking for somebody who cares about the community they live in, I do live in this community in Croydon North, in Thornton Heath area, in Selhurst, then you should maybe look for a candidate that's going to represent you from the heart and through principle. Now, one of the strangest things that's happening actually at the moment is just last night, about 11 o'clock on my phone, I looked at a Twitter account, and actually last night, 1,900 new members just joined the Green Party. 1,900. And we've just, I believe, just overtaken UKIP in their membership nationally now, and with a fraction of the publicity that UKIP are having. Now, what is happening is that people are actually looking deeply at this, especially younger people, because they maybe actually haven't grasped onto a political party and haven't grasped onto a brand, and is actually looking for answers. And actually, amongst 18 to 24-year-olds now, the Green Party's tied with the Conservatives in second place on 22%. Now, if you go to a website called Vote for Policies, where people go in and choose any of the subjects on any of the issues, could be education, health, the environment, or policing, or what have you, you get some questions, and you put in your answers that you like, or you see the answers ahead of you, if you like, and you don't get to see which party is actually putting that for you. The Vote for Policies website is encouraging people to look at policies and not personalities. Now, if you go to that website, Vote for Policies website, the Croydon North constituency, which is a very strong, safe Labour seat, the winning party at the moment is the Green Party. Does that surprise anybody? Well, if you actually look at the policies carefully that you think you believe in, those other parties that you think are representing you don't actually do that. It's the Green Party that's representing your views.
Well, I'm afraid we've run out of time. We could spend another 2 hours quite easily, but sadly time won't permit it. I'd like to ask the audience their views. There's been a great deal of time spent about overseas aid. I'd like you to raise your hand if you feel that we should continue with the same level of overseas aid. Please raise your hand if you think we should. Oh, that's good. It's about 60–70%. Thank you very much indeed for attending. Thank you, panelists, for your excellent answers. And thank you very much for your questions. Good night.